It was the summer of 2000 when I first met Stephen Hume and was introduced to the Goat Yard. I was 24 and had never been on a sailboat. The motley group of sailors who called the place home welcomed me and defied convention of what I would normally associate with the Yacht Club. They entertained me with stories from the past, adventures on the high seas, political intrigue, and wonderful inventions led for the most part by Stephen at the helm. There's an old saying that goes, "The difference between a fairy tale and a sea story is this. A fairy tale begins with, 'Once upon a time,' and a sea story begins with, 'This ain't no bullshit.'"
I brought my stepson here 2 years ago. So we go home, and Jordan is explaining to his father where he went. And he said, I was on a tugboat, I saw a sunken shipwreck, I rode a tandem bicycle, I saw an armored car, rode on a fire hydrant. And my husband looked at me and he's like, where the hell did you take this kid?
The Detroit Boat Works is a very unusual place, but it is Stephen is what it is.
I heard about the goat yard and this guy with a beard, and he lived with a goat, and he had a duck that was a giant duck, which turned out to be this all-terrain vehicle. It was legend. It was a legendary thing, and I wanted to check out and see what it was all about because it just sounded so interesting to me.
He's a 1960 hippie. He hasn't changed. Good sailor.
It's like when I wake up in the morning, I can't wait to come here. So I have an awful lot of fun here. You got to do something with your time, and like my dad always said, do whatever you want to do. I don't care if you want to run a junkyard. Do whatever makes you happy, because you're going to be doing it the rest of your life, So that's basically my attitude on this place.
I was pretty happy it wasn't an uppity-duppity yacht club, because I'm tired of tiptoeing around in the yacht club. And besides, everybody was passing out beer. I was actually pretty impressed, because there was all this shit, man.
The Goat Yard. I don't know exactly how to describe it. Other than, all my experience has been there has been a lot of fun. It's, there's certainly some interesting boats there. It's a big contrast compared to where I'm used to going to big events all over the world, and only, I don't know, I don't want to say super rich people, but there's certainly people that have a lot of money at these events, and you go back there, it reminds you that sailing is really grassroots and sort of brings you back down to home and keeps it real, I guess.
If you're talking about clubs like Detroit Yacht Club, Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, Bayview Yacht Club, you're paying a membership. You're supposed to be a member when you're there. And the Goat Yard is, they're not so concerned about keeping up appearances, so to speak.
I know a lot of people come by, why? How could you have something like this? Why do you have a fire engine? All this stuff. And it's like, it's on my list. It's like fire engine, aircraft carrier, freighter. For a while I wanted to train, but I don't want to train anymore.
My first time coming to the boatyard, I do remember driving into the boatyard, and you look around and you think, oh my God, what the hell is this? Your first reaction is, what is this?
I think the perceptions are, the men love it, and they figure, how can you get away with this? And the women say, what the hell's going on? Like, the women will say, why would you own a fire engine? And no guy has ever said, why would you own a fire engine? Men know guys need fire engines.
The very first time I saw the Goat Yard was at night, right? And I'm not kidding you, the burning barrels were going on. It looks like something out of Mad Max, where, those steel structures and these boats and fire engine trucks and military machinery and all that. You know, it's kind of pretty cool to see this stuff going on. It's pretty neat.
The fact is, the impressions of first-time visitors don't do justice to the reality of the place. Even its name was unorthodox.
Who first called the boatyard the goat yard? I do not know, but it sure did spread.
I don't know what people think, you know, if they just hear goat yard, what are you talking about? Well, it's a long story. There was goats at the boatyard.
It's amazing how it's stuck, because the goat's been gone for a long time now, and everybody still calls this the goat yard.
I was very glad to have the opportunity to know a goat. And it helped me learn about human nature, animal nature, knowing it, because they're very peculiar animals.
I was talking to some of the Detroit police in the mounted police, and they had some old mounted horses that they were going to retire. And we had a lot of space here. And so I thought I'd get a horse for Sue for her birthday. So I brought it up to Charles. And Charles was the old Hungarian cavalry guy. And he said, Stephen, this is no yard for a horse. There's too much re-rod. This is horrible. If you get a horse, I will report you myself to the Humane Society. Why don't you get her a goat?
They're not like dogs at all. They're egomaniacs. They have tremendous pride, and they're smart and cunning.
He was pretty good when we first got him. And then later on, he was sort of ornery.
You didn't forget once you met Nemo. He was big, and he usually pulled some kind of stunt. The goat could spring straight up in the air 25 feet. Well, he sprung up on this gentleman's boat and dropped some raisinets all over the place. And this gentleman was furious, and this war started. And so then one day, we're all standing around talking, and Nemo walked up quietly and stepped on the guy's toe. And he was convinced that this goat did this on purpose, which maybe he did. So he poured an RC Cola on the goat's head. And I thought he would jump up on his hind legs and those horns. I mean, he could do some serious damage. And he was calm. Walked away slowly, walked down the driveway past 6 cars, and jumped on the top of this guy's Porsche. And dented it all in. The guy ran over with a big 2x4 and started swinging at him, and he was just jumping rope on top of the guy's Porsche. Just had it painted too.
He'd just sit there and eat leaves all day long. He'd sit and eat leaves. If you parked your car under the leaves, then he had already eaten as high as he could get. So then if you park your car under there, which a lot of people did to stay in the shade, then he'd stand on top of your car to get the leaves that he couldn't get from the ground.
I gave him a nicotine habit, so he would find a purse, anything that had nicotine in it.
The guy, when he sold it to us, he said, feed this goat 1 cigarette a week, and that'll make sure that he doesn't have any worms. He says, don't give him any more than that, because if he gets addicted to cigarettes, watch out. And he got a lot more than 1 cigarette a week.
He would nudge your cigarette pack out of your pocket. Just with such tenacity, he wanted cigarettes, man, and anything leafy and green that was smokable, he thoroughly enjoyed.
My brother Christopher had a son, Jonathan, and he came down to the yard with It's a Boy, a whole box of It's a Boy cigars. And he was handing them out, we were all smoking them. And then we were all drinking and stuff, and somehow when he left, he forgot the box of cigars. Well, the goat got into that box of cigars and ate the whole box. And for the next 3 days, that goat was just laying on the cement, just moaning. Some of the noises coming out of him, he was sick. And he just loved paper. And if a woman left her purse, he would rummage through the purse, and he'd eat a registration, he'd eat any kind of paper, he'd eat all the money.
The oil inspection sticker off the inside of your car door jamb. He loved those things. He knew they were there. The minute you opened your car door, he would go for them. And he only had bottom teeth and ripped that thing off. the glue, I think, something, I don't know. He really liked those. Any paper in your car, he would get rid of for you.
He'd eat a whole case of beer, all the box, the tall neck the boxes. He'd eat the whole case. He'd sit down in one sitting and eat the whole case.
Our friend hardware store went out of business once, and he gave us a lot of things, including the entire display of fish hooks. Big fish hooks, little fish hooks, multiple pronged fish hooks, all kinds of fish hooks. Brought it down, set it on the table, went to unload more stuff out of the car. Nemo already had it down his throat.
And I came up to him just when he was eating them, and I didn't know what to do because the nylon strings were all still coming. They were like dancing out of his mouth. I didn't want to like yank on one. I know it would catch him, but I just thought, well, everybody say goodbye to Nemo. He just ate a whole, I don't know, it was like 100 fish hooks there.
It never bothered him in the slightest. He never showed any sign of anything abnormal being ingested at all. One time, somebody had been hunting, and they had these beautiful rack of 7 points. Huge. The thing was 3.5 feet wide. And Stephen got the bright idea that we should duct tape these to Nemo's horns.
We taped these antlers that were like this big, all these points coming out.
He climbed around on top of the building in front of the moon and just mugged for us. He was a show off.
He got a job at the Detroit brewery, and they had this Bach beer, and the goat was the symbol on the Bach beer.
And we would take him around to different beer tastings. And he had a lovely red blanket he wore with fringe. And he liked it, he hammed it up. He had quite an ego. And then we got used to taking him around. He got accustomed to the car, so Stephen took him to the Caucus Club once.
And the London Chop House and the Sinbads. And we said, goat and tie, right? And he got loose in Sinbads. He ran all over that, went all the way out to the front windows.
So he was quite well known, and people came for years after he was gone. When the river freezes over, we can't control wild animals coming into the yard because they can walk on the ice. And Nemo could outrun anything. He was fast as lightning, but on the ice, those hooves didn't work too good. So about 8 dogs got him down on the ice and tore him up pretty good. He survived the night, and then the next morning I went out there and he was actually laying down, which he really didn't do very much of. And then he just died, just stretched out and died. But he got at least 8 good years. And then Jerome Ferretti dedicated his beautiful painting of the boatyard to him and hid all the vicious dogs in the corners of the paintings.
Well, when he died, it happened to be Ernie and my brother Peter were here, and they're both hunters. They both shot and cleaned a lot of deer before. And they said, well, it's a shame to just throw all this meat away. I said, hey, come on, you guys. And they go, well, we should stuff his head or something. I said, all right, let's do that. And so they cut his head off and put it in a bag, and then they took the rest of the body. I don't know what they did with it. And he went and took the bag with the goat head in it up to the taxidermist. And I think it was like $450 to have him mounted. So it cost 10 times as much to mount him as he cost alive.
And then about a year later, I had done a political fundraiser for someone, and I had handled a lot of cash, and I had drank a little too much, and I was just a nervous wreck. And I came home and walked in my door, and there was Nemo hanging in my entrance hall. And it just made me feel horrible. And I was very upset and walked around only looking at the floor. I couldn't quite remember exactly where he was hanging, and I didn't want to see him again. And finally I got used to it, the old guy. The taxidermist allowed us how he had never stuffed a goat's head before.
When I came in, it was right in the front of the store, and they had all these deers and the goat, and it really looked out of place. And they said everybody just loved it.
He looks pretty good, I think, and I still scratch him between the horns like he liked every now and then, just to remember. He brings back a lot of good memories.
The origin of the Goat Yard actually predated Nemo by almost 10 years. Stephen's entrepreneurial spirit and fate combined to lead him down a path to St. Jean on the east side of Detroit. The old adage rings true that one man's junk is another man's treasure.
I used to buy boats at Keen's. That's a marina over here, a real high-class place. And then I buy the boats and I will try to sell them. And then I thought, well, that'd be a good thing, better than working. Well, I ended up having to pay boat storage at Keen's, and it got so bad I had to get a job in a factory to pay my boat storage. So I thought, well, what I need is a boat yard. And so this place was just an old abandoned brick factory, and I talked to the owner and worked out a deal to move my boats over here.
Don came down to the boatyard and discovered Stephen had sort of homesteaded the property. He talked to Stephen about half an hour, noting this and that and the next thing. I think, although I wasn't there, I get the impression the conversation went finally like Stephen realizing this is probably, he said, this is yours, isn't it? Don said, yeah. Stephen says, good, because I want to show you this idea I've got for the perpetual motion machine. Don and Stephen became best buddies.
When I first met Stephen, he had this boatyard down here, and it was quite a bit larger. And he had all old wooden motorboats, mostly old retired black gentlemen. And we had so much fun. And he was always looking for more people. And this friend of his said he was going to a Crescent meeting. And Stephen said, well, I'm going to go with you and try to talk these sailors into storing their boats here. And he said, well, you can't talk unless you join. So he joined. And he said, all right, you can talk. And he said, does anyone need winter storage?
Over the years, the Goat Yard has continued to attract people as unique as the yard itself, thanks in part to Stephen's influence.
Do you think the Goat Yard would be what it is right now if it weren't for Stephen?
Of course not. I mean, it's basically the last hippie boatyard on the face of the planet, really. And it's in the middle of Detroit. Who knew?
We're doing stuff, you know. We're not just sitting around only drinking beer, but we'll be working on a boat or working on something.
He also is interested in experimentation and values that.
I think there's a lot of eclectic people. There's a lot of really incredibly talented people that come down here. You know, everyone is, you know, you want to say like they're at the top of their game.
I think that some of the appeal is that we're just such dumbasses. And they can really help us out. They can say, well, you dumbass, this is how it's done, you know? I mean, we don't try to be the fool. We just are the fools, you know? These guys, you sort of feel sorry for us, and they figure these guys are gonna get hurt if I don't hang out and help them, you know?
They have engineering skills, they have design skills, they have all these skills that they bring, and at some point in time, you know, do utilize. And that's what makes it, I think, really special, is it isn't just one kind or group. It is an eclectic group that has come together for the benefit and the welfare of the boatyard.
Everyone they come from different backgrounds, they have different histories, they have different, they come from different economic strata, different educational levels, different political views, different religious views.
I think that it just attracts all the people that want to express themselves.
There are some common threads, which is passion for sailing, and the passion and respect for the Crescent Sloop.
It's about the people. It isn't the boat. A boat's just a boat. Yeah, this one's fun. And yeah, there's that, you know, the first fiberglass full keel boat ever made. Oh yeah, it's all good fun. They're inexpensive to own, and that's what I can afford, okay? But it's the people that I do this for the people.
I think the Crescent class, it is like a family. And people will help each other out of any kind of jam. It's amazing. I've seen people loan each other huge amounts of money and stuff, and bailing each other out of jail and stuff. And it's a real close-knit group.
It's all about the fun and friends. That's the whole story here. Yeah, that sums up the boatyard spirit in a nutshell. It does.
Sailboat racing was a sport of royalty. Originally, the America's Cup was a challenge that was made personally to the Queen of England. And the change to what we have now, the millions of sailboards and little thistles and lightnings out there came very slowly and in kind of fits and starts. And the Crescent came around mid-century and was definitely one of the less expensive boats out there.
Even though the first Crescent was built in the early 50s, they continued to be a favorite among the sailors at the Goat Yard. But what exactly is the appeal of a 60-year-old sailboat?
A Crescent Sloop is the most valuable object in the universe as we know it. They may find something better somewhere, but till now, this is it.
A wooden boat will die a natural death, but a fiberglass boat has to be assassinated. And fiberglass has proved to be a marvelous material for making sailboats out of. Crescents have bounced off curbs and broken the curbs. And they're still sailing. We've got one that's 56 years old that's still seaworthy in the yard. We have the first one that was launched in '53. Lyndon Babcock, Dick Hill, Charles Karastash. They were a bunch of designers, artists who knew each other from childhood. They were at Ford. This is the end of the war. They gave them fiberglass. The year GM came out with the Corvette, '53, they launched maybe the first full-keel fiberglass boat, the Crescent. Same year, October '53. And they all kicked in, and each one of them had one built, and they built the class from that. And Dick stayed with the fleet his whole life. He built the first one in his backyard. I was good friends with Dick Hill's second wife, Martha. And as he was building the boat in the backyard, one day, 3 gentlemen in suits came to the door, and she was afraid to answer. She thought it was IRS or something, but when she did, they said, "We're from Dow Chemical, and we've shipped a third of the fiberglass we produced this year to this address. What are you doing with it?" And they were happy to show them. The Crescent was a really fast boat. It took off, and it was considered for the Olympics, but they didn't have the cash to go into full production, or there would be Crescents all over the U.S. right now. And they ended up only building 27, and they were all built. Some were built in Toledo. That's the furthest away, custom craft in Toledo. But they were all built around here from a few different molds, but they're very, very close. So much so that the U.S. Men's Sailing Championship, which is still sailed today, it's called the Mallory Cup, and they sailed the Mallory Cup in Crescent. And they said that they had never had more even sailing as far as the boats go. They were very pleased with them.
Well, yeah, they've been around since 1953. And when they built them, they were the most modern boat of the type. They were the high-tech, state-of-the-art boats. So anybody that was really into something brand new and fast were buying Crescents, even though there's so few of them that were ever made.
It's like a Grand Prix racer, like a hot shit little go-kart racer, compared to driving a big, fat old Cadillac around a course. It's just cool.
Whereas most sailboats are painted white, the Crescents look like a box of Crayolas. We got orange, and we've had purple. I don't think we have one now, all bright colors. They're graceful, and Charles immortalized it in a beautiful little drawing of all the Crescents. Stephen would line them all up.
It's a beautiful boat with a very low freeboard and a very tall mast. And I think that these guys were real daredevils to design such a craft.
However, not everyone shares this idealized opinion of the Crescent Sloop.
They don't call them floating coffins for no reason, those hatch covers. But the design is piss-ass poor, and there really isn't a way to secure them down. I mean, you can tie them down and pull that line as tight as you want, and you go down the wave, and they still pop off. Unsafe. Unsafe is all we can call it.
They sail these boats that, you might be able to put your foot through the floor, but we sail them.
Dick Hill, Lyndon Babcock, and Charles Karastash designed and built sailboats that were as daring as their characters. Of the three, the most colorful was Charles Karastash.
Charles gave us more probably than anyone, even though I don't know that he was hands-on with the building, but being a young man, very wealthy Hungarian, he was captured by the Allies and brought to the United States as a prisoner of war. And he faced the Allies on horseback, and they were in tanks, he always liked to tell. And he was very handsome and very charming and a very talented artist who loved horses so much. He made the logo of the Mustang for Ford and had one on the end of the tiller of Crescent number 4 that he sailed his whole life, right till the day he died.
Charles was he had that Hungarian accent. I think he used to work on it because he had been here for so many years to have that thick of an accent. And he'd always call everybody you asshole. He was big on calling everybody an asshole. And he didn't mean anything by it, Come here, you asshole. That was just Charles, But it was amazing. All the women just fell in love with him. He'd go up and he'd kiss their hands, and he'd just make them feel like $1 million. And he'd tell them that he wanted to paint them in the nude. And, he was just a dirty old guy, and they loved it. Oh yeah, he used to take a lot of them out, and a lot of them wouldn't wear any bras, and they were very careful to get their t-shirts all wet. And they'd like to go into the clubs, not wearing any bras, with their t-shirts soaking wet. This is one of my earliest memories of the Crescent class, was Charles with a bunch of women with wet t-shirts.
He made beautiful paintings for the fleet of all the spinnakers in watercolor, and a meeting notice, he would whip out a pen and ink, just beautiful. But he also did for us a lost wax method bronze of a Crescent in heavy water with every detail of the boat, the spreaders, the shrouds, and only one person on it driving, and the waves lapping up all around it. It's at quite a heel. It's beautiful. And he did all this just out of love. He never got any money out of it. But what he mostly gave to the class, besides a lot of charm, was our chant, which is a Hungarian battle cry.
There's 26 clubs in the Detroit River area that are all members of the DRYA, Detroit Regional Yacht Racing Association. And what they do is they help organize the races. And then what happens is after every race, on a Saturday, there's normally a party at the host club. And so then we get to go to different clubs throughout the whole area. And then their Commodores get all dressed up in the pretty white ice cream suits. And they give you the flags for first, second, and third place. And that's where we do the Crescent cheer. Well, it starts with somebody saying, et ectaharum. And then everybody else repeats, hi, 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 hi. It's definitely a big thing, and it shocks a lot of people. And I think what shocks them the most is that how everybody does it exactly in time, how they'll do it from no matter where they're standing in the huge ballroom. Somebody will be standing all alone giving this cheer, and then when the cheer's done, there's dead silence. And there's no yay, yay, or anything like that. It's just like they do the cheer, and then they go right on to their conversation. And it's really, everybody's just like, what just happened? It shocked me the first few times I heard it. Now I'm one of the instigators, so it just shocks everybody else. Some people say that it's 1, 2, 3, hip hip hooray, and then somebody said it's ride that sailor, and I'm not really certain what it means in the Hungarian language. We'll have to ask a Hungarian.
Traditionally, yacht clubs have a multi-generational community of sailors who were born into the sport. But the Goat Yard and the Crescents are anything but traditional.
The Goat Yard, they don't make it so, pompous. It's not a pompous sport there. It's down and dirty and fun and cool, and let's go out and have a good time and learn something.
I find that about half the people I take out on my Crescent, I change their life. There's half of them who don't want to get wet, don't want to be scared, don't want to break a fingernail, and the other half are just fallen in love, and they will sail the rest of their lives if it's crewing for someone or buying their own boat. But they will sail, they'll do their darndest to get on a ride, and it will improve their quality of life.
So it's not for everybody, but it's amazing. A lot of people, once they go out, they just, they're hooked. When we take people out racing that have never even sailed before, and the idea is just to, like the first time, they'll say, well, what can I do, what can I do? And we can put them right into the, into the fire. I used to sail with my friends when I was really young, and I just saw the Crescents just having way too much fun. And then later on, I'd come by and I'd hear all this noise, this cheering that they were doing. And I look over and there's the Crescents again. And it seems like, they had the pretty women that were scantily clothed, and they were stumbling around drunk, and they had all these musical instruments and everything, and they were having a lot of fun, and everybody else was like, with their nose up in the air. It was my feeling.
The Crescent sailboats are been around for a long time. It's a one design fleet. They're a much smaller boat, and all I could tell you is the guys seem to have more fun than any group I've ever seen.
Oh, they're fun people. I mean, really fun people. They've done sailing a long time. They've had a long history of sailing. They're good sailors.
I think one of the best things that the Crescent fleet does, you've probably been told this, is they bring new people into sailing that have never been sailing before. They spend a few years here, and then we feed the rest of the fleets with sailors, because everybody's always looking for crew.
I hear it all the time. Oh, you sail? Oh my gosh, I would love to, but I don't know how. It's like this, I think they think that you have to be a Kennedy to go yachting, to go sailing. And I tell them, you don't know. It's really, you spend a summer on a sailboat, we'll teach you how to sail, you'll love it.
That's the beauty of the Goat Yard, I think, that I don't think there's a sailor down here who sailed as a kid. Everybody came to it as an adult, stumbled on this place in the middle of an industrial area and was offered a ride on a sailboat by somebody who 10 years earlier had been offered a ride on a sailboat. And because it costs $25 a year to join the Detroit Sail Club, as opposed to thousands at most clubs.
Before I started sailing, I was going to leave. I was ready to move out of Detroit. I didn't want to be here anymore. And I found sailing, and it's a whole world, and it's accessible. It's so accessible here. I can't do what I do here in any other city. Probably in the world. I don't know, maybe the world, but in the United States, in Chicago, you can't afford it. The East Coast, West Coast. I can afford it as a bartender, as an anthropologist. I can afford a boat. A lot of people can afford a boat and put it in the water and go sailing.
You got the most competitive fleet in town. Maybe the most competitive fleet in the country.
We sail them fast and we sail them hard, and we have a great time doing it.
Treacherous. There's no inch. There's no moment. It's one wrong mistake, one hesitation, and you just lost your place. It's that tight.
People get in there and they mix it up a little bit. They bump around the corners. America's Cup boat would fall apart if you did something like that. You can't have more fun fully dressed under 10 miles an hour than one of these.
But then if there's anything that goes on the water, it's completely, it's done when people come back. You're out there, it's neck and neck, but then when you come back and everyone's friends, everyone's drinking, and they laugh about the race, if somebody made a mistake, they laugh about that too. But, it's treacherous.
Without the boat to pull everybody together, it wouldn't be the same. It was just a boatyard without too much of a direction, but this one class of boats has like really gelled everything. And like I say, it's having a big family that all have a great hobby. And we go out there, and sometimes when it's storming, we risk our lives. I've been out there and my boat sank, and these people are all pulling me out of the water and stuff. I mean, you do that for anybody. But I mean, it's a good feeling to know that, people are gonna go the extra 10 yards.
What I like about sailing is the camaraderie of my good friends and the stories. The stories are the best.
I was at a bar called the Union Street on Mac, and I needed a favor. I needed a ride home. I had been dropped off at the bar. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I knew the bartender, and he said, "Sure, Bill, I'll give you a ride home." Well, the very next night, I'm back in the very same bar, and he said, "Bill, I need a favor." And I said, "Well, sure, I just owe you one." And he said, "Well, after I get off of work, I have to take my boat up to this North Star Harbor because I'm going to be in a race tomorrow, and I got to get the boat up there so that it's all ready to go." And we got off of work, we went down, got on his boat, and we took it off and started heading towards this harbor up by 9 Mile Road. And he said, "I'm going to go to sleep. You steer the boat, go that direction." And I said, "Great." And he went to sleep, and I went to sleep, and we ran aground somewhere up in Anchor Bay. And we turned around and made it back, and he said, "I'm not gonna have time to pick up my crew, so you're racing." And I was wearing a white 3-piece linen suit. And we went racing. That was my first sailboat race.
I think it was 2 years ago, maybe like the third week in January. I think the temperature got around 50 degrees. So we all decided to go sailing in the middle of January. And the Coast Guard came out. There's like 5 of us on this O'Day, and we're like huddled for heat, because by the time we get out there, we're freezing our asses off. And the Coast Guard comes up to us, and they're looking in the boat, and finally they just look at us and they, "What are you doing?" "We're sailing, man. What are you guys doing?" It was awesome. They thought we were out of our minds. I thought they were going to search the boat, but it was so small and there were so many people on it, there was nothing to search. So they just sped away. It was hilarious. Hilarious.
As regards that question you asked, which was, what do I think about what these other people may look down on us? As, we're not really racers or sailors, okay? We're just clowns having fun. Well, they're right. We are just clowns having fun. A lot of fun. But we're doing the same thing they're doing it, and we're doing it every bit as well.
We're sort of like the troublemakers. I think we're just the lovers of the lake. Not only do we love the lake, but the women love the men, and the men love the women. And we carry on.
I really miss sailing, living in Mississippi. It was really my getaway from the real world. Now I just sit around and masturbate because, there ain't nothing else to do where I live.
In a sport typically dominated by men, the male-female gender ratio has proven opposite of the norm in the Crescent class.
It takes a special kind of woman to groove here. It seems we found them all.
For women, I think that maybe the group isn't so only guys can race. They're pretty open with that and always have been. So that makes it really conducive for someone to say, some woman to say, "I'd really like to sail." Someone's going to say, "Well, come on down. I'll take you out."
I think it's mostly women, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't somebody give me a percentage? 85 or something? 87% are women. Yeah, they love women. They're old salty dogs.
Charles loved women. He made them feel beautiful. And I do think that's why there's so many women driving Crescents and crewing on Crescents and with very fond memories of Crescents.
Beneath the hijinks and low-level anarchy that Stephen encouraged at the Goat Yard lay a fierce opposition to the widespread political corruption that engulfed the city of Detroit.
Don Williams came down here. He's a big fat guy. And he was an artist, a very talented artist.
Don went to school, art school in Barcelona, Spain. And he also did a lot of posters for some of the activities that went on. One of the races that they had here in the fall was called the Numbskull Race. And Don was the one who also did those posters, and they looked like something out of the Grandy. They were just very elaborate and just fabulous.
And he just had this vocabulary, and he could make you feel this big in no time. And he would just do that to everybody. He was just, he was horrible.
He was quick-witted and, you know, the stiletto tongue. I mean, he would, you know, go for someone's jugular, really, and just for fun of it, or because he could.
I feel like one of the best things I've ever done was try to redirect his energies to do something productive against Coleman Young.
This was the beginning of the end of the Coleman Young administration. There were some good things about the administration, but they've been in power way too long and were way too corrupt and way too arrogant. The department heads were unresponsive to the needs of the people. And something's gotta happen.
He was very interested in becoming politically effective. You know, he wanted to have a say in what was going on. And Stephen, you know, and Sue were both, you know, very politically connected.
And Stephen's advocacy for Detroit kind of wore off on him, I think. And he agreed to put out this paper called The Hardline. He had access to a printer. He actually had an old A.B. Dick printing machine. And he always, you know, wanted to get published. He was a wordsmith.
The Hardline was a scandal rag that exposed more scandals on the Young administration than all the grand juries, all the investigative processes, all put together.
It was pretty scandalous at the time. And Stephen's antics were well known already. So everyone figured that he was behind the whole thing, which he kind of was. You know, in a way, he was an inspiration for it, I think. And like I said, the people would come to him with information and hand off information to him that they wouldn't normally divulge, just because they knew that, you know, how intense he was about making sure that the defilers of Detroit found their comeuppance, you know.
They would try to expose, you know, graft and corruption in the city.
We wrote stories about sludge hauling contracts and Chief Hart, you know, the police chief, and his misgivings, and all sorts of stuff that we heard from people that talked to Stephen. And so he was actually editor Y. Editor X was Don Williams, and although people accused me of being editor Y, I would just appeared under my name Hawk and wrote sophomoric awful stories just for shock value. And it got a lot of notice. In fact, they were talking about it on the news, on TV. There were stories in the papers.
But then some of them be pretty graphic in colorful language, but nonetheless, you'd want to read it.
We set up a KY Jelly fund for Chief Hart because we knew that he was going to be going to jail, and as he ended up going to jail, and probably met with a reason to have KY on him. But we made up names that went along with the sludge hauling contract. Like there's a guy, and he ran a construction company, and supposedly there were mob ties, and we blamed him for a lot of the things that were going on. And right soon after that is when our headquarters got shot up.
Don's no longer with us, so I'm sure that I guess the story can be told. Don Williams published an address for the Hardline for a vacant building on Mack Avenue, right across the street from Grosse Pointe Park. As soon as the hard line hit the streets, the first issue, 3 days later, the front of the building had been machine gunned. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of bullet holes in the front of this building because he'd exposed a surprising number of inside crooked deals that the Young administration had been involved with. Well, the second issue came out. The corner of the building was firebombed. The fourth issue came out. They finished firebombing the building, burned it to the ground. All that did was whet the appetite of all the would-be whistleblowers in the city of Detroit. Don had a telephone number drop line that went through 3 different phones until it got to him. And these city workers were calling, saying, you know, I know that so-and-so was involved in this payoff, that murder, that beating, this extortion, that shakedown. It was one of the wildest things in the world. Don swore us to secrecy, but he's dead now and he can't do a thing if we tell it.
I know that the people were not happy, and we were touching a nerve even when we made stuff up, you know. I mean, some of the stuff was just malicious. There's no doubt about it.
He did some of the funniest things to poor Coleman. I almost felt sorry for Coleman, some of the stuff that Don came up with.
It was never meant in fun. It was all very serious. However, when we would get together and talk and stuff at the Goat Yard, of course, it would always be hilarious. You know, Stephen had a way of making the most dire circumstances even, you know, hilarious.
There was always rumors of vote fraud. There's always talk about ballot boxes that were, you know, showing up to be counted and the locks weren't on them and things of that nature.
Half the ballot boxes that were coming back to City Hall in those days, they called them transfer cases. They were metal attaché cases that had the votes sealed at the precinct, locked, a seal, numbered seal placed on across the handle so they couldn't be opened, and half the transfer boxes that came back to the City Hall before they went to the Wayne County Election Center on Grand Boulevard came in with broken seals.
And so based on hearsay and innuendo, and somebody told somebody or you overheard something, they just put the whole story together. And what they didn't know, they filled it.
So Don, having an unbelievable imagination, would say, well, you know, here's how it would work. And he would write it down as though it was fact. And then he would get a few names and he would just expand on these ideas. And, you know, and it would turn out, you know, we'd find out, you know, weeks or months later that 80% of it was true. And all the things that they were up to were happening.
It wasn't just, yeah, I know it wasn't just Coleman. I think they were trying to expose that, you know, this city, this isn't right. And, you know, at the top is Coleman, who condones this. But it was a lot of issues that was going on with this city. Editor X and the retire young, you know, kind of went hand in hand.
It began, you know, pretty innocently as Stephen would go out and he had a kite and he would fly it off the back of this little, you know, 14-foot aluminum boat, the Susabella. And, you know, so he came up with the idea to put retire young on it.
Kevin Honey was his primary partner in crime in that operation.
It started out small. We were in a 12-foot fishing boat with a 6-horse motor and an upside-down bicycle that we'd pedal with our hands. One person would run the boat, and the other person would try to get the kite up. It started out with one 24-foot banner, about 2 feet tall, and it said, "Retire young." And the first time we went out, we were dodging ice floes, and we immediately got arrested. The Harbor Patrol came out from Belle Isle. Actually, on the ticket, it says 2 men on an ice floe waving a banner. And they thought we needed help. They made us follow them to Belle Isle, took us in there, they weren't sure what to do, impounded the boat and the flag.
Suzanne and I had gone to Florida and we came back. Stephen said, Suzanne, I hate to tell you this, but the police have seized your boat. What? She said. They took your boat away. They said we weren't the owners. So we all went over to the harbor master's office. Suzanne read the Police Riot Act. What do you mean seizing my boat? How do you have the authority to take private property that doesn't belong to you? Well, they were flying a kite in the middle of winter. They were in the ice floes. I didn't report this boat stolen. Return this boat to these boys.
We think right then it was probably political. And I'll say some things that, like, once we went by Cobo Hall and we saw the curtains going down. You know, Coleman could see us from the city county building.
Well, it still wasn't quite big enough. So, and I think it ended up on the front of somebody's houseboat. He welded a motorcycle onto it, and he used a wire. And now he had a huge banner, and it said, "Retire young," and you could see it for a mile. You could see it for 2 miles.
And we did it for the Grand Prix and the fireworks. And we know everybody saw it. We never made it into paper. But Draper Hill, the editor, I think Detroit News, made an editorial cartoon of Coleman Young looking at a newspaper, and then there's like 2 hippies in a boat flying a banner. And I had hair then. Yeah.
We were flying the kite downtown. We got too close to the Renaissance Center, and it snagged the string, and the kite landed on the roof. So immediately we zoomed the boat and put it on the shore and ran into the Renaissance Center and went down to the maintenance department and said that our kite is on the roof. And then they said, "Oh no, it's all restricted. You can't go out on the roof. And the guy that's got the key, the only man that has the key, is gone, and he's at lunch, and we'll have to get back to you on it." And I said, "Well, it's very dangerous because if the thing blew into the city, it's got nylon string and everything, and it could get caught in traffic and, you know, hurt pedestrians, and it's very dangerous, and we'd like to get that as a safety issue off the roof." So then we kept calling, and they said, "Well, he's not back yet. So then finally we got the call and said, "Okay, you can come and get your kite." And they said, "And if it's there, you can have it." Well, we knew it was there. So we went out there on the roof, and it wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere. And so I said, "Well, come on, it may be over here." So I got the guy as far away from the doorway where we came up. And then I ran as fast as I could back and ran down the stairs and ran up and down all the aisles in the attic. And I saw just a little piece of it coming out of one of the trash bins. But this guy comes down, this poor guy's going, "What are you doing running ahead?" And I go, "Oh, here's our kite. Oh, thanks a lot. Oh, here it is." And right away we went out there and flew it right again. Stayed away from the Renaissance Center.
And we weren't going to be stopped. I lived right on the river there, about a quarter mile from the Belle Isle Bridge. I'd look out my window in the morning. "Stephen, the wind's right. Let's go." We got 9 tickets. Stephen did end up getting a ticket on one of the last trips. We had so many people during the Grand Prix. The police boarded us. We had life jackets all along the rails. We had enough, but they gave him a ticket for not enough. They had to find something to gig him on. We went to court, and 1 ticket stuck. That was the left of center, the driving ticket, but they gave me a ticket for unlawful launching. MC numbers improperly spaced, that was the first one when they came and got us. I would never do this again. It's like the ice is out there right now. It's nuts. And of course, it was a noble idea at the time, you know. I would say that we needed a change in the government.
Stephen's opposition to the corruption in the city of Detroit did not stop with the hardline.
There's another guy who shall remain nameless, but there was a classified ad taken out at the time saying that there was a yard sale at the Manugian Mansion, which is the mayor's mansion, and that there were various items, furniture and Krugerrands that were going to be sold, and there was a big scandal about Coleman Young and the Krugerrands. The classified ad was taken out in the paper, brought a lot of attention. People showed up for it, and of course there was none, but it was the people were trying desperately to find out who actually did it, and they were not happy about that. Oh, it was in the papers, you know, that was front page, and you know, it was the first thing they mentioned in the news broadcast. So, I mean, We knew that that it had hit home.
The city was a little angry with me because I was trying to recall Coleman. I used to be a thorn in his side.
Stephen was campaigning for mayor of the city of Detroit at the time. And times haven't changed a hell of a lot in these days. And the most important thing to Detroiters back then was jobs.
Yeah, I was running for mayor.
The end of the world's coming! The end of the world!
And they said, well, what's your campaign promises? And I said that I would build an Aqua Car, and I will get a patent for it. And then, in order to give somebody royalties to build the patent car, my only requirement will be that they make it in the city of Detroit. And the idea being that therefore we bring jobs to the city of Detroit.
Stephen says we can do this. And this was Stephen's design more. I'm more of a enabler in this plot.
And the idea was to take a Dodge Ram, roll it upside down, pour a bunch of foam on it, disconnect the drive shaft that goes to the rear wheels, and put a prop shaft in there.
I think the one thing that really made the whole concept was that pour-in foam. They got two big drums of it, right? Then they'd mix it up and pour it in, and it would just start foaming up. And you never see stuff like this. It's like, wow, look at this. So then it's foaming all out, and then they have to cut it, shape it into size, for that, the special look.
Stephen took the drive shaft off and put a prop shaft on there, and we realized the prop shaft was too close to the differential in the back. So the back axle came out. Front axle came out of another pickup truck, got welded straight, turned upside down so there was clearance. And now, when you were in two-wheel drive, that prop turned, and that was it. When you were in four-wheel drive, the front axle wheels turned, and the prop turned.
Well, those guys were quick. They figured it out what they needed to do, drive shaft here, foam there, flip the car, and it was ready to go.
And it was the day of the election we launched the Aqua Car.
But it was a prototype, and we figured as soon as it went down into the water, this thing was going to roll over. It just looked like a lot of fun, and it was a lot closer to campaign promise truth than most campaign promise lies were. Well, to our amazement, not only did the thing not roll over, it floated at exactly the right level. Our calculations that were done on the back of a Sinbad's napkin were actually accurate. It looked like it was built in a factory.
Some of the fishermen saw us when we went in the water, and we were videotaping it, and they're laughing. And then we're out there, we're zooming around. We spent an hour out there fooling around. We come back, and the guy's still laughing. I thought he was gonna have a heart attack. The guy was laughing so hard. And it was so fun to watch somebody enjoy it as much as this guy was.
And the whole time, even though you're there, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is really happening. They're just driving it into the water.
And we had a wonderful time with it until the Coast Guard showed up. We saw them coming from a good distance, motored back to the ramp, drove back up and into the boatyard. They're left wondering what happened. Well, then we take the thing down the road, and we didn't have any license plates or MC numbers. So here come the police, so we got to hightail it back down to the ramps and into the water, and they go away, and the harbor master comes, and we go back out of the water. And this went on like this for a month until finally the police came from both the water and the land. But it was so entertaining, the police couldn't bring themselves to ticket anyone. Besides, how do you ticket a boat for driving on land? Or a car for driving in the water? It was a wonderful thing. Well, the election was rigged, as it turned out. We all knew it. Stephen did not win the election, but the Aqua Car still lives on, unlike Holman Young, who did.
I still think it's like one of those engineering, amazing engineering feats. GM, Ford, Chrysler, it took them, concept cars go on for years, but not the Boatyard team. They put that together in a week.
Shortly after we started this film, at the request of the landlord, Stephen agreed to have the Aqua Car towed away and recycled. It was just the first of many changes at the Goat Yard. The biggest change came in 2013. Stephen and Sue took control of a modern marina a short distance down the river called Greyhaven. Within months of possession, all of the Crescents were moved to the new location. The Goat Yard went dormant. And as the seasons changed, so did Stephen's health. In May of 2011, Stephen was diagnosed with a particularly aggressive form of lung cancer. As his health declined, he agreed to our request for one final interview.
As far as the future of the boat yard, I don't see it changing too much, and I'm leaving it to good hands. There's no big fortune anywhere to be had, so it's their decision. It's like I was doing what I'm doing now. If somebody, I left a few people in charge, and whatever they decide to do, it's fine with me. I think that the Goat Yard brought a lot of people in whose family didn't sail. Mostly when you go to yacht clubs and stuff, it's somebody that's handed down through the generations and families. Sailing is something that you get from your father or your uncle or something like that. It's normally a family thing. And we brought a lot of people that had no access at all, that were just like, hippies downtown, hanging out in coffee shops, playing with their computers. That kind of thing just doesn't come from nowhere, It did in our case. It just came out of nowhere. So we've really created a yachting community from nothing, from no past.
Tell us maybe some of the biggest things that kind of stick out in your mind, just looking back over the course of when you started the boat yard, to present day.
Just some of the surprises, like, I remember Sue and I were sitting in a bar up in, we were with one of her family. It was in Mount Clemens or someplace. It's a very odd place for us to be. It was an upscale bar. And there was a black gentleman came over and wanted to buy us a drink. And I didn't realize who it was. Well, it was Mr. Walker. He was the city attorney for the city of Detroit. And he was like a junior attorney. His whole job, he worked there for like 3 or 4 years. He said his whole job was just harassing the Goat Yard. And that he just had to buy us a drink because we were responsible for all his work. That's all he did when he went to work in the morning. He said other people have 10 cases and stuff. He said he had just this one case, harassed the gang at the Goat Yard. And we drank his drink. It was fine. It's like, you did your job, whatever, dick. But that was a rewarding feeling that I gave this man a career. My dad used to say, you work harder not working than anybody who has a job. Just you work harder trying to stay out of work, trying to not get a job. And that's very true. But then he was also the one that said, I don't care if you're a garbage man, just do whatever you like to do. And he didn't hit the nail too far off the garbage man, and people call it the Goat Yard a dump and stuff, so. One man's garbage is another man's treasure.
Any regrets?
That I didn't meet Sue earlier. No regrets.
The Detroit Boat Works is a very unusual place, but it is Stephen is what it is, and his drive to have a good time is very important to him. But he also is interested in experimentation and values that, and he told people for years that he'd rather go broke building an Aqua Car than be rich doing anything else. But he's made a lot of interesting experiments down here, and he's a very open person who's very kind to people, and he's always encouraged other people to get involved in everything that he does. And it's been a lot of fun for people, and It's been a place for men to be men, too. And as much as I've tried to clean it up and tidy it up, it's just not gonna happen. It's, there's gonna be engine blocks laying about, and so what? And that's just how it's gonna be. And men need, especially right now, a place to be men, I think. And it serves a very good purpose in that.
I think all of us owe a debt to Stephen. And there's only one way to repay that debt. That debt is that Stephen taught us by his person and his example that taking risk, being unafraid to fail, be willing to stand for something, damn it, generally was worth it. And usually nothing bad happened, and usually good things did happen. The lesson that we learned from Stephen, the teacher, was the lesson of confidence and personal pride. Now, the only way that you can repay this debt is to honor the life lesson from the teacher. Live the life of your convictions. Live with confidence. Try the things that you don't think you can do. Stephen would have. Live fearlessly and love fully. And that is the gospel of Stephen.